In this episode, we discuss some recent comments from Superman director James Gunn about how he expects his Superman movie that's coming out this week that's going to be offensive to some because it's about kindness. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man whose insights come at you faster than a speeding bullet, and they hit harder than a locomotive. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, you ready to show him how you crank that?
Of course, man. I just, unfortunately, unlike the Man of Steel, I do spit in the wind, and I trip on my cape. I pull on my own cape sometimes. You know,
Unfortunately.
So, yeah.
All right, but before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you subscribe, like the show on YouTube or your podcast platform. Doing so really helps the show out. We're recording this on July 8th, 2025, and there's a new Superman movie that's dropping this week, and the director of the movie, James Gunn, who has done Guardians of the Galaxy and other movies in the past, so this is some new guy to the scene. He threw out some interesting sentiments in a recent profile he did with The Times. Specifically, he suggested that he anticipated that there will be people who find his new Superman movie offensive because it's about kindness. And about these people, he said, and I quote, "Screw them." So, yeah, to that part of the audience, he lets them know what he thinks about it. Now, we've seen studios struggle to deal with online criticism about movies, and movies that are like not Superman itself, but like that, like we've seen it with Star Wars movies or Star Wars shows, or some of the Marvel movies or Marvel shows. And like studios like Disney's had like really turned themselves in the notch trying to figure out how to either avoid this kind of criticism from people online or to appease these people and to change their shows or not do their shows or something like that because of this criticism from people online. But Gunn's mindset seems to be a completely different way to kind of look at how to deal with this, and just, it reflects maybe that he's comfortable with what he's doing and he's proud of what he's doing. So it's a really different approach than what we've seen from like Disney with that. So what are your thoughts on James Gunn coming out in advance? And that's the other thing, he's doing this in advance, coming out in advance and saying screw you to the would-be critics online and so forth about his new movie.
I think he's learned from watching others, right? Like you said,
watching others fail even,
Yeah, that's what I mean. Star Wars is a great one to bring up. Let me just put it that way, as a traditionally popular American franchise in terms of a fantasy story that in recent years has got unfortunately caught into the culture wars by those who don't like, aliens that they don't agree with, whatever. So I think this is interesting, man, because
aliens when aliens and such were not the right race.
Yeah, exactly.
Or other stuff like that. Yeah.
Let's say it this way as a nice joke. Bring it to humans to bring bigotry to the stars, right? Like
make believe aliens. Yes.
Yeah. When we colonize Mars, we got to prepare for, the bigotry and the classism and all that. But anyway, back on topic, and that's what I was going to say is it's interesting to see him go on offensive about this. And it's almost like, almost contradictory. A guy's going on the offense and being aggressive about being kind. So, I think there's something to be said about that, defending kindness and empathy. And I think it's interesting that it's on the back of a superhero, a guy that actually, when we have all this conversations about things like toxic masculinity and certain men trying to tell everyone else what it means to be a man, here we have an icon in America for the last few generations of what a real man is, the Man of Steel. And being told by this director that, no, the Man of Steel that I'm creating here is going to be a kind person, or Krypton or whatever he is. So that's my thoughts on it. This is
I remember when you first sent this to me, like my first question in my own head was, is he being like overly sensitive, or is he being crazy like a fox, so to speak, because on one hand, like his job right now, his job when he was making the movie is to make a movie and to make something that thought audiences would respond to and that, would take people on a journey that they would enjoy, but his job now is actually to get people talking about the movie, so this kind of like, you can look at it and say, okay, is he out here, kind of whining about these online critics, these trolls or whatever you want to call them, toxic fandoms or whatever? Like, is he out here, like kind of going on the offensive because he's overly sensitive about this? Or is he kind of like going on the offensive because that's going to get like him doing that is going to allow him to take the narrative from them and, actually start attacking them and get more people talking about it? Like, it seems to me that he's really doing a really smart play here in the sense that, like, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. Like if he wasn't on the offensive, doing, maybe we talk about the movie, maybe not, but we wouldn't. Like, this was much more notable that he goes out and takes this approach, especially in contrast to the way, like, we saw the Star Wars people change their third trilogy, change the storytelling of it midstream. Like, oh, they went one way in the second of the third movie, then they went another way in the third of the third movie. And it's like, and a lot of that related to, them trying to appease fans that were mad about this or mad about that and other things. It's like, that's a lot, to do. So this guy kind of made a movie and was like, we're going to make the movie the way we want to make it. And then comes out at the time when it's time to be promoting it. And instead of, just kind of doing some bland stuff or whatever, comes out, pointing fingers and saying, screw you to a bunch of people. And it seems like he's crazy like a fox, in that sense, because normally like, okay, yeah, you probably shouldn't go out and telling the audience to screw them. But I think it does reflect an interesting kind of point in the culture that we are, because the idea of being proud of doing something that everybody might not like is something we seem to, at least a lot of people have lost. There are people that will stand tall and do things they want to do, but a lot of times the people that are doing that these days are the people that are going to do mean stuff, or the people that want to be exclusive. But the people who want to be nice to people or to want to be kind to people, a lot of times have taken a more of a back seat and kind of been shy and bashful about not wanting to be mean to other people. And so it's interesting to see Gunn out being like, okay, yeah, we're gonna make this movie about kindness, and if you don't like it, then screw you, because I'm good with that. I don't need you, like, I'm doing the way I want to do it. And so that was refreshing, to kind of take a mindset of, hey, we can do something better. We can be about our better selves, and take that with the aggressive tone, as opposed to, again, the only thing we hear on the aggressive tone now is people wanting to do mean stuff to people. Is kind of the people that have been more vocal and more and aggressive in what they're doing.
So you're saying the people that complained about cancel culture maybe a decade or so ago are now aggressively canceling everyone else. That's
of course.
Yeah,
but their problem wasn't the canceling. Their problem was what was being canceled.
Exactly.
Clearly.
So, that's what's really playing out now. We're seeing that here, kind of the back half of this journey that we're in for the last decade or so. But I want to say this. I think both can be true. I think he can genuinely feel this way, and also be smart enough to understand that he's kind of disrupting a narrative in the media and all that, in kind of, like you're saying, going and kind of outright attacking people that don't think kindness is something that should be, celebrated or kind of openly practiced. Let's put it that way. So, because I want to read a quote from one of the articles I know we're citing. He says, quote, "Superman is the story of America, an immigrant that came from other places and populated the country. But for me, it is mostly a story that says basic human kindness is a value and is something we have lost." So I do feel like, and I've seen other quotes from him that mirror that sentiment. So he seems like a guy that genuinely, he like you said, he's made a lot of popular movies that have done very well. And in this era, he's looking around at his world, like you and I are, that we produce this show, right? And he's saying, well, I have something to say about what's going on in the culture now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use my platform and my ability to make great movies, and a movie about an American superhero. But let me remind everybody, he's not actually American. He came from another planet. Like, that's why I'm not going to bother, I'll save the audience from me quoting him a million times. But there's other areas where I read where he refers to Superman specifically as an immigrant from Krypton.
Yeah. And
that he got here and he bettered America, he bettered the world, all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. I think it's like, and you're very good at this idea of curation in our society and culture. And I think he's an example of a guy that's trying to get back the narrative as one of our cultural curators, let's say, as someone who makes movies. So I found that, I just find it very interesting. We're at this point, and the Star Wars thing it hits home to me because I'm a Star Wars fan, but also because it's nice to see him take this aggressive stance as a content creator, as someone creating content, because I feel like what Star Wars did, unfortunately, they took this backpedaling and they started allowing the fans to tell them kind of how they're going to make things.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. The recent show Andor is very popular, and that seems to be one where the studio finally said, no, we're going to keep making this stuff the way we make it. And I feel like this guy is a good example because we've seen this is kind of the culture now. It's happened in politics, right? The politicians just react to what the people want, and no one's leading us. And I feel like this is an example of someone in the arts shaking us as Americans and saying, hey, we used to be about this stuff, like helping people and being proud of that and going around the world and propping up democracies and doing all these things. And so, where
I wanted to get in terms of the America had historically been, and we're saying like over the last 100 years or so, a superpower in the world, and the values of the nation reflected one of using power by and large. Again, this is not going to be, I'm painting with a broad brush for the purposes of making a point, of using power not only for it did for its own benefit, but also to help others, like in ways that weren't directly in its benefit, like you mentioned, propping up democracies. So the idea of having more power and not just using that power to step on people, but also to try to help people was something that existed in American culture, and Superman reflected that. And so, the idea that what the Gunn is really pointing at here is that Superman is someone of infinite power, basically. And he has a movie about him using that power, not just to step on people that are weaker than him, or, hey, I'm powerful, so let me find somebody who's weaker than me in society and let me kick them around, but using that power to help people, and he thinks that this is going to be subversive to a chunk of Americans. And again, it's going out against that. So, what do you think? Or do you think that having a Superman who, despite his immense power, is kind to others and tries to help them, as opposed to being insulting towards people that he thinks are beneath him or mean to them, is a message that Americans can even be receptive to still?
I don't know, man. Because you asked, can Americans be receptive to it? We've got to the point where, there's people in our country and our culture that think that Jesus is too woke for Christianity.
Not people, man. There are Christians, people who are Christian, not just random people, but people who claim to follow that dude.
Yeah. So, and you realize that, so you and I grew up, born in the late 70s. So kind of growing up in the 80s and 90s, going to school and all that. And we were taught at a time that, we grew up at a time where we still had people that were teaching us that fascism was bad, democracy was good, one man kind of leadership
absolute
styles.
Power corrupts, absolutely.
Yeah, all that stuff and following kind of one man type of strongman type of stuff was bad. And then also from a religious standpoint, right? Jesus was out there helping the poor and the meek and turn the other cheek. All these kind of things that we learned, the whole thing about throwing stones in the glass house, all that stuff was kind of the spirit that came from the religious side. But there's another side of, just like we're seeing, there's another side of how to do politics in the country. There's another side on how to do religion. And there is a part of this Jesus story where he turned over tables and where he smote his enemies and all that kind of stuff, right? So I do think this is why it's an interesting Superman, this film, and this director, like an inflection point of this and kind of having this conversation, because in a way, he's an example that we all make choices. We can all look at, and this is a great point you make, Superman is a great fictional character for most of us, especially us men, who want to fantasize about what would it be like to fly around and shoot laser beams out of your eyes and be able to dominate people.
Yeah.
And
what would
some
you do
people
with that kind of power? Yeah.
Yeah. What would you do with it? Right. And so we're seeing that some people in our society, in our culture today, that we can see on TV and they're part of our entertainment and our political world and all that, if they had all that power, they would use it a certain way.
They would use it to kick other people, find immigrants and kick them down, or whatever. They would use it to find people that they thought were in a marginal position relative to them and do dirty stuff.
Create an alligator Alcatraz, right?
Yeah.
Or do something like that. So meaning, going out of your way to be a little bit extra cruel when we already have regular prisons that can lock people up. But no, I want to now see them chased by an alligator. And so, or those people could say, well, we would like to have the ability to bring people into the country who aren't criminals, and maybe we got to fix the system. But by bringing them in, they help us out. It's a goodwill, they're sending money back to their countries, kind of keeps everybody, America as the center of attention for the world and keeps us on top. So let's not do an alligator Alcatraz. Let's just fix the immigration system. So it's, people, we all have choices on how to look at these things. And again, as a director, he's telling us his choice is going to be to choose to paint Superman as someone who uses his power in a way that most of us that grew up in the time you and I grew up in would assume that would be a good way to use it.
And that's consistent with the Superman character. Like I remember this from being younger and seeing things like this, but you shared it with me just this week when we were getting ready for this. Just like Superman used to fight the Klan, like Superman used to fight Nazis. Like, so Superman was oftentimes against the types of people, these fascist types of people that wanted to gain power and use that to attack marginalized people or marginalized groups. Superman would fight against those kind of people, historically. Yeah. So it's not a departure that Superman may look at his extreme power now and use it to exert kindness. And again, I think the emphasis is, it's not that Superman's a fictional character, so he can be, whatever a director or writer makes him be. And the United States, it wasn't that it never has been the United States is all good or all this or all that. It's that the United States, there was a value in amongst many in the country that strove to be better. It wasn't that it always was. You could find plenty of fault in anything any large institution has done. But the question is whether you strive to be better or whether you actually strive to be meaner, strive to be the one that do you want to make people afraid and then kick them when they're down at that, or do you want to say, okay, hey, there's a certain way we're going to do these things and you have to abide by that. And if you don't, then we got something for you. But if you do, then, hey, we want you to flourish. And so the idea of Superman in that context, I would think that again, Gunn is out there saying, hey, these people are going to find this offensive. I would imagine that if you had Superman versus Nazis now or Superman versus the Klan now, people would be offended, or there would be a segment of society that would be offended by that. Because
they would be.
Attitudes towards those groups now in certain areas of society are not, we aren't all on the same page. As far as
here's the reality, James. The reality is that somehow the bigots and the Nazis became the victims. This is what happened. I mean, I'm serious, man.
Well, they've always been the victims in their own mind.
I mean, but that's my point, right? It's like they're sissies and they're weirdos. All the stuff that people say about them is true. I mean, first of all, let's talk about. I was thinking about this in your hometown area. The Cincinnati, Lincoln Heights area earlier this year, Nazis went into a black neighborhood in this part of Ohio, and what not being invited, they just decided we have the right to just go to this other part of town where these people are and harass them. So they start flying swastikas.
Intimidate them, yes.
Yeah, they got flags with swastikas on it. They got long guns, all that. And they're going into a black neighborhood. Clearly, that's an aggressive move for no reason at all. And I wonder what would happen if a bunch of blacks went into a white neighborhood and just started with guns, just started walking around and harassing people. So the long story short, I'm saying is that.
Well, but to tie your point up though, and then when the neighborhood responded and started, showing up, they were the one calling the cops like, "Hey, protect us! We need protection!" Yada yada yada.
So hold on, flush that out for the audience real quick. When the blacks in the neighborhood went and started asking, "What the hell are you guys doing?" and start saying, "Get the hell out of here,"
protesting them,
correct. Then the Nazis call the police and they get a police escort out of town. And that's my point. Like these guys are so tough until someone confronts them. And it's the same all the time. The bullies, you punch them in the nose and they usually fall apart. So that's what I'm getting at is, it was people on Twitter X that were crying about, not being able to use the N-word or make fun of Jews, and they're victims, and then, they get their freedom of speech, and then we see what happens. The platform is a cesspool of bigotry and hate. So, if this is what people want in their society, this is what they're going to get. And I agree with you. Like I'm reading here one of the articles. Captain America was famously punched Adolf Hitler on his first issue, but it was Superman who was the first to take on the Nazis. I didn't know that the first issue of Captain America comic book, he was punching Hitler in the face. But you're right. If that came out today, if Disney, who owns Marvel today, did a specific thing where Captain America fought against the Nazis, I bet you there would be a whole backlash against it. Yeah. And they would say, oh, you're rewriting history and the Nazis weren't so bad and all this stuff. And, here we are. So I guess we're going to have this open conversation.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we're having this open conversation as a nation again as to, what does it mean to be nice to people or not, right? And I think we're going to get to the point at some point where people are going to do political correctness again and say, oh, this is too much. Let's just not call people names anymore.
Well, it is, those things happened in response to other things. And it's like, if you're in a society with people, then generally speaking, a certain level of social behavior is required. And so we have, and this is probably a natural kind of ebb and flow of things where people are like, hey, people are saying, I want to be antisocial. You want to be yourself. I want to tell you can't be yourself, and I want to ridicule you and stuff. And I want to do all that. And that's not social behavior. That's antisocial behavior. I want to call you names. I want to use, or go beyond antisocial behavior. I want to use the power of the government to do mean stuff to you just because I can. And so every now and again, there are people that are like that. It may be a small percentage, but there are people who are like that. That's just who they are. And there are people who are kind people. And then there's probably people that can go either way, depending on where the currents are going in which way in society or what behaviors are being rewarded in society. And so it's really a situation where right now we're having that conversation again. We had that conversation, in the past, in 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and society decided, hey, we gotta let's have a certain level of decorum when we do these public things that everybody's going to kind of abide by, and that's a way for everybody to kind of just be social. And human beings are social creatures, so can we operate in groups or not? And some of that requires people to not necessarily be able to do everything they want to do or be as mean to everybody as they want to at a time. So it's an interesting moment in society. I think Gunn recognizes that. I think to kind of tie this together. And so this is kind of he's putting out a kind of a mission statement or hey, I want to curate something that will show people a certain way of using power. And he's not just doing that. Then he's going to get out and talk about it and tell everybody, hey, this is what I'm doing. So that, just in case it didn't go over your head, I want you to know, this is just specifically what I'm doing. The way you wield power, there are choices and how power can be wielded. It doesn't have to be where if you have power, that means you got to step on people that are weaker than you. You could also have power and hold your own, but also bring up people as well. And so he's kind of throwing out that mission statement. It's interesting to see, and I'm interested to see how the public will receive it. But I'm glad that at minimum, if he's going to do something like this, it's not some kind of meek thing, because being nice does not have to be soft and meek. Being nice can be, okay, this is my general approach. And then if you show that you aren't deserving of that, then I got the heat for you too. Like that's a way of being kind as well. You give people a chance. And most people, if you hold out that hand, will take your hand and be okay. The ones that don't, they can get the fist, and that's fine, So yeah. To me, it's interesting that he is trying to meet this moment. And he talks about, like I said, we'll have the piece in the show notes, but he talks specifically about, the online cultures and things like that, and how a lot of that stuff, those are changing the incentives, in terms of whether it pays to be kind in the currency of the online world, or whether it pays to be mean in the currency of the online world. So, he's taking his shot. He's putting something out there, and we'll see how the public will receive it.
I think that our experiences online and the performance of big tech stocks can tell us which one is working which one is playing out.
But one taps into, like some basal human, emotions, and some of the, like, again, if you want to motivate people, fear is, making them afraid of something, or if you want to get their attention, that's just how we're wired, because survival instinct, if something is going to quote unquote come after me, if wokeness is going to come after me, then I'm going to pay more attention to that because it's like, hey, I got to make sure that wokeness in the bush over there doesn't jump out and try to eat me.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
know? So
That wokeness got some big claws though, so you should be careful. Now I'll say this joke. I know we're going to go is because as you were talking, I chuckled because you were like, yeah, so from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s when we were trying to work this out. I'm thinking, man, that's a long time, dude. I'm pretty exhausted. So, I guess I think we're just gonna have to be used to this.
Well, I mean, it's a constant.
That's why I don't want to live for 500 years, bro. Because
but what I'm saying is that it's a constantly evolving thing, and so it wasn't like there was a period of upheaval, then there was a period of calm. It's constantly evolved, but there were certain kind of social norms that got adopted by the majority of a society. And then those norms are being challenged now, so that's kind of the ebb and the flow of that. So, so I think we can wrap this up from there. We appreciate everyone for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Until next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, and we'll have a call out coming out this week, so check that out also, and we'll talk soon.